Gayatri Bharadwaj, can you offer a better explanation? Because everybody I'm asking this is just dancing around in circles.
Well, Rahul, let me begin by saying that it has taken a very long time for the Supreme Court to pronounce this judgment. People moved the court back in 2017 when the amendments to the laws were brought to facilitate the bringing in of the electoral bond scheme. And therefore, I agree that this judgment should have come perhaps much earlier. And in fact, we've been very worried because there's been a general election that has happened. There have been repeatedly state elections that have been happening with the electoral bonds very much intact. But let me also tell you, Rahul, another point on retrospective amendments. If you recall, the FCRA, the Foreign Contribution Regulatory Act, when the BJP and the Congress party were found in violation of the FCRA, what did they do? They simply went and retrospectively amended the FCRA to say that, look, now we will say that not only going forward, we will accept foreign funds, we will also accept them retrospectively, whatever happened after the court declared them in violation of the FCRA. They said we are changing the law retrospectively. So now as citizens, we are seeing these kind of things happen in our political system, unfortunately, repeatedly. And what is happening now is that a foreign company, if it sets up an Indian subsidiary, it can channel funds into a political party. Through electoral bonds, the big concern was that the Companies Act was amended, and there was this fear which the RBI in fact wrote to the finance ministry about before the electoral bonds were brought in, to say that this will just increase black money in the system. There will be money laundering that will happen through these bonds, and there will be unlimited amounts of money that are unaccounted for, that will even come from foreign sources.
No, but I just want to tell our viewers that Article 20 of the Indian Constitution prohibits the legislature to make retrospective criminal laws. It doesn't prohibit a civil liability retrospectively, but it prohibits any criminal law being brought in retrospectively. And in the landmark judgment of Kedarnath versus the state of West Bengal, the Supreme Court held that when an act is declared a criminal offence by the legislature and provides penalties for it, such declaration is always prospective and cannot be applied retrospectively as part provisions of Article 21. I want to give our viewers a very simple example. Take, for example, the voluntary income disclosure scheme, SY Qureshi. Now, for whatever reason, if somebody makes a voluntary disclosure, because the finance minister at that time promises that their name will be kept secret, later you say, no, now I will make your name public. But that just then spooks everybody, right? Then I don't believe anything that the government is saying, because you're taking money from me, saying that this is voluntary and suddenly making it public.
Yeah, quite right. At the same time, let me tell you, in VDI scheme also we have seen, but that many of those people were subjected to investigation later on. Immediately they were given relief, but later on they were investigated. So to that extent, the government did not keep the promise. But if you allow me to come back to Anjali's point, now the retrospective change in the act was not by 1 or 2 years, by more than 40 years. And getting foreign money, it has serious security implications. Foreign countries can interfere in an election, which is the reality. Russia was accused of interfering in US election. So that can happen here. If such serious things can happen with the retrospective effect, why are we considering it so innocent in this case?
Sujata Paul of this Congress is also with us. Sujata Paul, where does the Congress party come out on the Supreme Court judgment and the fact that the government seems to be laying the grounds to go out and ask for a review before the Supreme Court?
The Congress party opposed the electoral bonds and has been opposing it since 2017. And it is one of our leaders, Jaya Thakurji, who is also one of the petitioners. Now, we have been making constant representations to the EC regarding the electoral bonds. But I do want to go back to the period that you were mentioning, and the ADR report says that 3,982 crores went to the Congress party at that time, and 3,200 72 crores went to the BJP.
Ma'am, how much of it was anonymous? How much of it was in cash, black money, anonymously given to the Congress party to fight elections? I'm not saying that happens only with the Congress, but that's the reality. That's what these electoral bonds were meant to change.
Now, that's what I'm coming to. Now, if there are problems over there in that particular system, things need to change. And we all agree to that. However, do not forget that in 2014, the BJP government came to power, and this law was brought in 2017. And whoever would be in power would be helped by this scheme. So the electoral bonds have helped them much more. Another very important thing is, if something is invalid, illegal, unconstitutional, and even if it has happened because the government has brought in the scheme, doesn't make it legal. When the Honorable Supreme Court says that this has to be struck down, it clearly means that there was something wrong. And there were not just 4 laws, 5 laws were changed at that time. Why did they have to change those laws? Because they wanted to benefit from corporates. And if corporates have been benefited, the right to privacy, is that more important, or the right to information of the voter? Because in a democracy, it is always the voter who is supreme. It is my right as a citizen of this country, as a voter of this country, to know who is getting how much and how he is benefiting from the party that comes to power. Should we know that, or shouldn't we? I think that is what I would like to say.
But Qureshi, how does this impact this election? The fact that, in a few days from now, the date of polling will be announced somewhere in the second week of March, most likely. With this scheme gone, now this review will be filed. I assume it will take a certain amount of time before it's heard. This election would likely be over. So how does this impact funding of this election? I don't see how we are better off without these electoral bonds. I mean, now it's all anonymous, black money, like it used to be in days gone by.
Yeah. I don't think it will have much impact on the coming election, because most of the transactions have already taken place. Only one tranche was left. So that may be affected, not that it will completely stop. And secondly, there's something which was being repeatedly mentioned by you particularly. It is true that Election Commission was also expressing concern that 70% of all donations were coming by cash, which was not transparent. We were against it then. Now, I have written and said many times that in this scheme, instead of cash, it is a banking transaction. Very, very fine. Stick to that. All we wanted, please disclose the donor and the recipient. It was a 30-second reform, and if it had been done, we would not have come to such a pass.
No, but if it had operated properly, then there may not have been a problem. The problem here, Aditya Shankar Prasad, is that the government knows who's funding the opposition doesn't know who's funding the government. Even though the government claims they don't know, but they have obviously ways of being able to find out, and that's where the Supreme Court had a problem.
No, I think the judgment of the Supreme Court is a very laudable judgment, and there are certain positive suggestions that can also be incorporated. That is for the people in the government to decide. But having said so, I think the fact that a novel initiative was initiated to bring some kind of transparency and accountability, and infuse some kind of a clear-headed funding process in the Indian electoral system, that is a laudable initiative, number one. Number two, insofar as the Supreme Court is concerned, of course, there are issues relating to transparency and the privacy of the donor and everything. But I think one has to see in the larger context of the judgment. Till the time I do not read the judgment, I will not comment on it, because there are certain legal issues.
No, but Anjali Bhardwaj, I don't understand how we are better off. Now that the scheme is gone, you're saying, oh, it's great that we've struck it down. How are we better off now for this election, which is one of the biggest elections in the world this year?
Bad or good. It's a democratic process. A legislation is challenged in a court of law. The court of law has the right to make certain observations. Observations can be debated upon. That is how a democracy evolves. I have no problem with that. But yes, one thing is there, certain suggestions have been made. Once one goes to the judgment, one can see what is doable, what is not doable, and that is up to the government to make.
Okay, Anjali Bhardwaj, how are we better off with this judgment than we were before this?
So Rahul, like Mr. Qureshi said, a lot of transactions have already happened. There has been money which has been given already to the political parties in the run-up to the 2024 elections through electoral bonds. And therefore, for many of us, I think as citizens, it would have been very useful to have this judgment much earlier. But be it as it may, the reality is that now going forward, even before the 24 elections, but even beyond that, this particular scheme, this particular instrument, which was really causing much more opacity in the funding process, has been stopped. And I think that that's a very welcome thing. I think if we are looking for solutions on what needs to be done to improve our political party funding scenario, to reduce black money and corruption, there are many, many solutions. One of them, of course, is that already the Central Information Commission of India has said that national political parties must come under the ambit of the Right to Information Act. They must appoint public information officers and give citizens information, so there is no anonymity in party funding. I think all political parties are sitting in what we can only call uncivil disobedience.